Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. Today's is going to be the second part of our Getting Started with Events. So this is a continuation of our previous events webinar that we did 2 weeks ago. So if you haven't watched that one, I definitely recommend that you go check that one out as a part of this one. You can definitely stick around for this one, but there will be some topics we're talking about that are a little bit higher on the advanced side of running more complex events. If you're looking for a general intro to events, the one from 2 weeks ago is probably a little bit as a better like dipping in point for getting started with events. Before we get too deep into it today, I want to go through a little bit of housekeeping. First of all of your microphones are muted. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. There is an option in the bottom of your Zoom window to open up the Q&A where you can post questions, and you can also see the other questions and answers that are being submitted throughout the webinar. We've got our customer success team member, Evan, on the chat today, so he'll be kind of keeping an eye, answering questions throughout. And at the end, we'll do a bit of a Q&A towards the end of the webinar to kind of go back and tackle any questions that need a little bit more detail. Additionally, a recording of this webinar will be on our YouTube channel. So if you need to go back and rewatch anything, or if you aren't able to make it live, you'll see this on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. One final thing when it comes to housekeeping, we have some unexpected construction outside my window today we didn't know about. So if you hear any construction in the background, that's why you're hearing that. If you are looking for the recording of this video, it'll be on our YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com, you will find us under clubexpress.com when you search on YouTube. That's with the dot spelled out. So that's ClubExpress, DOTCOM. You can also subscribe there. We always post all of our training videos there, all of our updates, any version announcements, any sort of video content we have, we post on our YouTube channel, so you can get notifications about when new information is coming out there. Finally, if you have any comments for us about how we can improve, or if you're enjoying using our system, you can always leave us a review at clubexpress.com/reviews. All of our review options are there, so you can let us know how we're doing. All right, so let's get into events for today. We're going to be looking at four primary topics today when it comes to kind of getting more out of our events and getting more detail. The first one we'll tackle is something called repeating date events. It's an option to have a single event that takes place on multiple days. Those days can be non-consecutive. So those are things like courses or regular meetings that only require one sign up or maybe don't even require sign up at all. It's a really useful way to have a single event, kind of one place where you keep all the details about your event, where it shows up across multiple days on your calendar, especially if those days aren't back to back. We're also going to take a look at event copying. So very similar to repeating date events, except for when you copy an event, it becomes its own standalone event. So very similar to repeating dates, just a different use case. The big difference with event copying is that if that event requires registration, then each copy of the event, so if you make 5 copies, each of those would have their own unique registration. And if you wanted to attend all of them, you'd have to register 5 times. Whereas with repeating date events, you would register once to attend all of the listed dates. We'll also take a look at how to set up event questions so that we can collect additional details from people that are signing up for our events. Really useful for things like allergies, food options, people's experience with something you're doing in the club. You can really get very creative with event questions. And then finally, where we'll spend the latter portion of today's webinar is going to be multi-activity events. So those are our larger, we usually refer to them as kind of like conference style events where you have multiple options that people can choose from when they're signing up for an event. And primarily, when you're doing a multi-activity event, the big difference there is you can actually charge people different amounts depending on different selections they make for activities. So, you can collect a lot of information about choices that people make using event questions, but if you need to charge people different amounts based on those selections, you'd actually want to do something like a multi-activity event. And we'll get into how to create those. But first, let's go back and let's take a look at our repeating date events options. So when we're using a repeating date event, I already mentioned it's used for an event that requires only one registration across multiple dates. Each date of those appears on the calendar. So it's important to keep in mind when you're copying those dates, when you're using that date selector to put those dates on the calendar, each date for that event will appear on the calendar as though it's its own event, but clicking on any of those will take you back to the primary, to the main event. So all of those options take you back to the same page. The dates don't need to be consecutive, so you can do really interesting things like, this is a course that's taking place every Monday and Wednesday for 3 weeks, so it won't show up on, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It'll just show up on Monday, Wednesday, and you can set it to happen for multiple weeks, and it'll show up on the calendar for each of those days. Very, very useful. And then finally, I'll show you how to kind of add those dates in bulk so you don't have to do them, one by one. You can actually use a really powerful tool to just say, I want it to be every Monday and Wednesday for 3 weeks, and it'll auto fill that out for you. You don't need to individually add every single date, especially useful for things that are happening, over the course of a few months. So it's happening every, a few days. That's a lot of dates to manually plug in. We can kind of streamline that process. So let me switch over to my screen share and let me show you how that repeating date event option works. So you should now be seeing the Northwest Balloon Club website. I'm logged in as the admin, Martin Smith, and you'll see on our calendar, I've already kind of set up a handful of events here for us to work through, but most of them aren't fully completed, so we can kind of put the polishing on them together. The first one we have here is repeating dates, learn to balloon class. So this is going to be an event that we're going to set up where people can attend this event to learn to balloon, but we want to set this up to repeat on multiple different days. So when I click on this event, I'm going to go and make changes to it by clicking on the pencil icon in the upper right-hand corner. Now, a couple weeks ago, we went over how to set up a basic event, and I did essentially just that. This is a very standard event with very standard registration settings. The one difference, though, is I'm going to go into my basic info settings, and I'm going to click on this pencil for basic info. And I'm going to turn on an option down here. If we scroll down through this page, there's an option right below our time zone selection that says this event repeats on multiple and or non-consecutive days. If we check this option, you'll see it changes a couple things. First of all, it takes away our finish date. It's going to assume just one start day, and then it'll copy that day out later on when we set it up. It'll also, checking that box, it'll also turn on this option down here below specify. You'll notice the box is grayed out to turn on repeating dates. Checking this box will turn it on for us. So all I need to do is check the box right below time zone and save, and that will add an additional panel over here. When I save that option, we will now have the repeating dates panel on the left-hand side. So once we have that panel, it adds an extra option when we're creating our event. We can click on that option and click the pencil. You'll see it's actually already filled in the first day of our event, and that will be true when you do this as well. The first day that your event takes place will be auto-loaded. So we set this up to take place on Friday the 16th from 11 to 2 p.m., and this is where we can come in and we can add individual dates. So we'll say it's going to take place on Friday. Let's go ahead and say for our balloon classes, that's going to be every Friday for 5 weeks at 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. If we wanted to start adding those, we can either just do it manually. So it's only 5 weeks. We could do it, 4 more times if we wanted to. So we've already got the 16th there listed. We can come in and we can say, I want the 23rd as well. So the following Friday, and we'll go ahead and say it's the same time. We can say 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then we would just hit add. And we could repeat that process here. And you can see we have the options to remove a day or edit a day. The original day cannot be altered. But importantly, we could just repeat that process to add all of the days we want to. There's also an option to say copy. There's this little copy button out here. And this is the option to kind of automate this fill-in process for us. If I click the copy button, what it's going to do is it's going to create copies of that first day that it's taking place on. But it gives me a handful of options. I can make one copy. So that would be very similar to doing the manual process that we just did. But the really powerful option here is the make multiple copies option. So when we're doing a repeating date event, if I choose make multiple copies, you see I get a lot more options to fill in here. And I already know that I'm doing this weekly on every Friday, so I would choose the weekly option. You can also do things like monthly or daily if it's happening every few days. You can even set them up to be yearly. I see that option get used much less. Usually it's weekly or monthly. For the weekly options, we'll see we get the option to say what's the next start date. So the next date, we've already filled in the 16th and 23rd, so we're going to say the next start date is the 30th. And then we can say we want this to happen every 1 week. We could alter that and say it happens every other week by choosing an option like 2, or every third week by choosing an option like 3. But if we leave it here every 1 week, that means it is happening every single week. And we say we want this to happen on Friday, so we can check the days of the week. We can actually have this happen multiple times. We can say this happens every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if we check all of those, then it would add events on each of the days that follow after this date. But what we want here is just every Friday, and then we can set a number of occurrences. And in this case, I know I need 3 more because it's a 5-week course, and I can put 3 there. Alternatively, if I know the week that it ends on, I could say it starts on this date every week on Friday and ends on a particular date, and it would fill in all of the space in between. But for now, I'm just going to say I want 3 more occurrences every Friday starting on the 30th. When I hit copy dates, it's going to create automatically 3 more starting on the 30th. It's going to copy the times from my original time slot, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then it repeats that process for as many times as I told it to repeat. So it can say there's Friday the 6th and then Friday the 13th. So now we've got all 5 of our time slots filled in. If this is all we needed to do, we can save this. If we wanted to add more, say this is also going to take place on a couple Mondays or something like that, we can move those around. Or if a particular Friday becomes unavailable, we could say, actually the week of the 6th, it's going to take place on a Saturday. We could come in, we can click on that pencil, and we can scooch that over to Saturday the 7th if we need to. Just by clicking the pencil, you'll see it loads in the details there, and we can click update instead of add, and it will change it to Saturday. So we've got 3 Fridays, then 1 Saturday. So we can kind of tweak this as needed. But once we've added all of the dates that are pertinent for our repeating date event, if we save this, now we've got those dates loaded. If we go back and take a look at our event by clicking the back to the event option up here, you'll see date and time, the original date that it takes place, and then there's more dates listed here. And if we click that, we'll see all of the dates and times that this event is going to take place. Registering for this event will register us for all of these days. We don't need to register for one or more of them. One sign up applies to every single day listed here. And if we go back to our events calendar, we should now see it shows up on each of those days, Friday the 16th, Friday the 23rd, Friday the 30th. And if I continue to the next month, you'll actually see there's our Saturday the 7th because I moved one day over. Maybe we weren't available on that Friday. And then there's our final Friday the 13th. Clicking on any of these options will all take us back to that main page. So if I click on repeating dates on Friday the 13th, it's still that same event starting on the 16th with all of these dates listed. And one registration will show us for all of those events. A lot of people tend to ask questions about like, well, what if I can't attend a certain day? Then that's usually just something you let that person know. There isn't a like pick a day from this list option. We will talk about something we can do like that with multiple activity events. That is possible, but for repeating date events specifically, these types of events, one registration applies to every single day. There isn't an option to say, I'm registering, but not this day. The registration process for a repeating date event is the same as the rest of the events. We would just say, I want to register, and the entire sign up process is the same that we went through 2 weeks ago. You're not going to see any kind of changes or anything, and it doesn't charge you for each date. So keep in mind, if you're having an event that's taking place over 5 weeks, and it's $5 per attendance, you would want to choose $25 as the price for that. If I set the price for $5, it's not going to multiply it by the number of days. We would want to just set the total price for the entire package of dates. So that's repeating date events. There's not much more to it. It's primarily just a way to list additional days that it takes place and make those days show up on the calendar. Otherwise, the functionality of the event is exactly the same. All right, so let's take a look at the next topic, which is going to be event copying. Event copying is very similar to the repeating date option we just looked at, except for one major difference. So instead of having multiple events that take place on, or one event that takes place on multiple days, we can have multiple events that take place on multiple days, but we can make them a copy. So if we say we have a board meeting that takes place every month and we want to just go ahead and make that easy instead of creating them manually, there is a copy function. So we're going to go ahead and copy this monthly board meeting here. Right now, you'll see it only takes place on this one day. It doesn't show up on future months. It's on the calendar, and I want to copy it. If I go to my control panel, and go to the events section from the website tab. So I'm looking in website modules and I'm clicking on events. This is the page we want to go to copy an event. We don't want to actually go into the settings of the event itself. We copy the event from the event manager page. What we would do is we would either type in the details that we want to search for that particular event. More often than not, I just hit search and show all of my events, and then I just kind of scan down and find what I'm looking for. I can see here on Friday the 17th, I've got my monthly board meeting, and I want to copy this to happen monthly. Right now, it's only happening in May, and I want to copy it so that it happens every month for the rest of the year. What I can do is I can go over to the icons over on the right hand side, and you'll see there's a clipboard icon. When you click on this clipboard icon, it will open the copy window for this event. And this copy window is going to look almost identical to the repeating date copy option that we just looked at. So we'll say there's our title. We can give the copies a name. I'm going to leave the titles alone because it's the same thing that we're doing. We're just doing our monthly board meeting. The only thing we're really changing is the date. I can come in here and I can either make one copy, so I could push it out a month. I could say I want it to happen on the 17th of each month. So I could say 6/17, and I could just copy that over and over if I wanted to. Just as before, I could copy it one at a time, or I can choose the option to make multiple copies. If I choose make multiple copies, I get the same daily, weekly, monthly option. This time I'm going to choose monthly. And then we have some interesting options when we're doing a monthly option. We can do things like the first day of every 1 month. So I could say, this happens every other month on the 17th or something like that, or it happens every single month on the 17th. I could alternatively say it happens on a specific day of the week. So maybe our board meetings are the third Monday of every month. So we can choose this option. You can get pretty specific with it. You can say, it's the last Monday, it's the first Monday. You can say, whatever specific days you want it to be. Say third Monday of every month. And then we can once again say it happens after every occurrence, or we can end it by a particular date. I know that there's 7 more that need to be added, but this time instead I'm going to say end by a specific date. And I will say I'm going to end by the end of the year. I just want them to finish out by the end of the year. So I'll go to December and I'll say end on December 31st, just the last day of the year. So this will go all the way through the end of 2025. And when I save this, when I hit copy, it's going to create a copy of this event on the third Monday of every single month, starting today and ending on December 31st. And when I hit copy event, you'll notice something that didn't happen with our repeating date event. So if we look down here, here's our repeating date event. Even though we set this event to happen on multiple days, it only shows up once on the back end because that is one event that takes place on multiple days. When I copy an event, you'll see it shows up here multiple times. As soon as I copy this event, each of those copies is now a standalone event. Each of those has their own registration. Each of those exists completely independently of all of the other ones. So the moment I copy them, I have made multiple standalone events. And if any one of them require registration, you would have to register for each one you intend to attend. So that's meaning signing up for one of these does not sign you up for the other ones. It also means that if you need to make a change to all of your board meetings, say, hey, now we do our board meetings on Mondays, now we do our board meetings on Wednesdays or something like that. I would have to go in and manually change each one of these. So that's something I always recommend, is to use a little bit of caution when you're copying events. Because if you make 50 copies and then suddenly you need to go change that event to take place on a different day, or change a detail about the event or the location, you can't just change one. You can't bulk change. You have to go in, because they are all their own individual standalone events. You'd have to go and make those changes to each one. So use a lot of caution. Make sure that when you're copying an event, you're either not creating too many copies, or you're very confident that the details of those events are not going to change. Otherwise, you could end up creating a lot of work for yourself if those do require, updates to every single one of them later on. What that looks like on our calendar. So now that we've copied that, if we go to back to our event calendar, let's go to, oh, there we go. There's our calendar. We'll see we still have our monthly board meeting here. And if we look at future months, there's our July board meeting, there's our August board meeting, there's our September board meeting. It has now been copied to every upcoming month. And every one of these, when I click on them, is its own standalone event only happening on that particular day. And I have registration options just for this one event. So I'm not signing up for all of them, just that particular one. All right, so that's event copying. Now let's talk a little bit about event questions. So event questions is a pretty big topic. Um, there is an option to, let me actually share my slides on this one because I want to make sure that we go over all the details of this one. This is a very kind of nuanced topic. There's a lot of details you can do here. You can be very simple with event questions. You can just ask things like, "What's your favorite color? What do you want to eat?" But you can actually ask some really detailed questions and collect some really detailed information. So we're going to go in depth on this one. Um, it is important to know that event questions can be added to an event to collect more information specifically just from your registrants. So it's not like a survey that can be asked after the event. It's not, which you can do, but that's not how event questions work. Event questions are only asked at the time of sign up. So it's not something, if you add event questions to an event after people have already started signing up, the people that have signed up are not going to be seeing those questions added to the event. So you want to make sure you have all of your event questions in place before you start having people sign up. It's also important to know that there's two different types of questions you can ask on an event. And there's a secret third type that we'll talk about when we're talking about multiple activities. But for now, when it comes to event questions, we're going to focus in on the two primary types, which is registration questions and registrant questions. Registration questions are asked once per registration, and that includes all of the guests. So when I sign up for an event and I'm bringing 3 additional guests, I will be asked a registration question only once. If I'm bringing 3 guests and I'm asked a registrant question, so again, registrant singular question, I will get asked that question once for myself if I'm signing up, and then once for each guest that I'm bringing. So if I'm bringing a group of 4, myself and 3 others, if there is a registrant question on that event, it will ask me that question 4 separate times, once for me, and then it'll include the names of all of my guests and ask, for this guest, what is the answer to this question? For this guest, what is the answer to this question? So on and so forth. So if I'm bringing 20 guests and there's a registrant question, it will ask me that question 20 times. Those questions can be made to be required or optional, so you might not have to fill it in for all 20 members. But if you do set a question to be required, they would need to answer that question individually each time in order to proceed with the event registration. Another important note about event questions, this is something that a lot of people bump into as like an oddity when they're working on event questions. When you're creating an event, the questions page does not allow you to create questions. It just lets you add questions to the event. The reason we do that is you actually make your event questions before you make the event itself. And once you've created an event question, it can be applied to multiple events. So it's a little bit of work up front to save yourself a lot of work down the road. So if you have, let's say regular dinners, or you have events where you serve food and you need to ask people about food allergies, you would create the food allergies question once. And then for all of your future events, all you have to do is say, I want to add the food allergies questions to this event. And you can reuse that question over and over, and it's still unique. And all of the answers are still unique to each event. It doesn't kind of move the responses to those questions from event to event. It's very, very useful to kind of make sure that your data collection for your events is up to date for each event without having to manually recreate that question every time you have an event. So let's go create an event or a few event questions, and then we'll register for an event with those questions and show you what that looks like both from the admin side and from the registrant side. All right, so I'm back in my control panel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my website tab, and I'm going to click on events one more time. And before clicking on any particular event that I want to edit or adding an event, the first thing I'm going to do is head over to the configuration button in the upper right-hand corner. And you'll see from this list, there's an option that says event questions. On this test site, you'll see that we have add question. We already have a lot of questions filled in, but we can double up on questions if we want to. We can create different versions of questions. I'm going to start with a couple simple questions. So I'm going to say add question. You'll see there's an option to link a question to, and you can link questions to things like membership info or additional member data. This is primarily used for things like, address or email address or, phone numbers, emergency contact, stuff like that. All that would do is for members that have that information already filled in, it would pre-fill that info into the questions, possibly saving them a little bit of time. If you're asking a question that doesn't show up on this list, then you would just leave it link question to nothing. And that's going to be the case for most of the questions you create. But if you do want to collect, say, especially emergency contact info as a part of signing up for an event, like a lot of our kind of activity clubs, bike clubs, hiking clubs, that's a nice way to save your members some time when they are signing up for an event. After deciding that, you have a couple options for how the question appears. We have the question name. That is for us. That is for administrators. The question name is what we see in reports and what we call this question. It is not the question that people will see when they are answering it. So in this case, if it's a food allergy, I would just say allergies. Because that's all I need for me to know that that's the question I'm asking. For the answer type, this is what response we want from our members. And there's a lot of different answer types. So we can do things like short text, which is the default, which means we're going to ask them a question, and then they will just type a simple answer, and that answer will show up in the reports that we pull and all of the registration lists. If we choose options like date, we can ask them their birthday. We can do long text for like an essay response style thing where they can fill in a long response if they want to. We can ask for a number answer or an integer answer. There's a lot of optional things. But for an allergies, I like to point out that we have things like the checkbox option where we can present them with multiple options to check off, or a select list or radio buttons where they select one item from multiple options. But for allergies, we're definitely going to want to use the checkbox option. And then the question text that we'll fill in is going to be the specific question that we want them to see. And you'll see we have a blank text box for us to type into. And then we've got some interesting font controls up here too. So if you wanted to, have some special font to it, you could also just leave it as plain text. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say, do you have any food allergies? That's my question. If I want to make it stand out, I could make it bold. I could increase the font size if I wanted to. I can change fonts and fonts colors. But for the most part, this is just where you type in the question, and this is what people will see when they are asked the question. We can add additional notes if we wanted to. We could say, select all that apply so that they know they can select more than one. And then the item list is the options they will be able to choose from on that checkbox list. So depending on the answer type that I select, the kind of configuration of the question will change down here. So there's things like true and false, and it'll ask me, what do you want it to say if it's true? What do you want it to say if it's false? For checkbox lists, we get the option to fill in a list of items. And then we can also designate minimum and maximum number of selections. So for food allergies, we're going to say things like, fish, nuts, gluten. We'll say vegetarian or vegan, different, food restrictions. We also give them the none option. So we can say, no, I don't have any. I have no food allergies. And we'll say minimum selection. I definitely want them to choose at least one. That way I'm making sure they read the question. So I'll say minimum selection 1. They're free to choose the none option. For maximum selection, there's all the chance in the world that someone could answer all of these. They might have multiple food allergies. So we can say there's no maximum. You can select as many as you need to. And then we also have the option to allow other. We can say yes. And what that does is it adds an other option here for us. So we don't need to type other and then include comments. We can just set it to other. And that will let them fill their option in. You can also allow for comments. So if someone says fish, but specifically shellfish or something like that, you could allow for them to fill in their own comments. An option that I don't get to see used a lot is the allow in emailings option. This just means when someone submits a response to a question, we can pull that question response into a future email that we send. For event questions specifically, I don't see this getting used a whole lot, primarily just because it's not something that everyone will have the same answer to. It might be not be the same answer format. If they select multiple options, it can just get a little bit cumbersome trying to make it look nice in an email. So I usually leave that no. Very rarely do I need to send someone back their own response. So I can save that option. Now I've added a new question called allergies. I did see a question pop into the Q&A. Someone asked, can you set a default value? For some answer types, you can. So again, specifically, so if we choose things like short answer, we can insert a default answer. But for the select list and checkbox items, there isn't a default option. But you can do things for things like number or text. You can auto fill in a default answer that they can then edit if they wish to. So now we've got our question added. And now for the rest of our time using ClubExpress, as long as this question is here and we don't delete it, anytime we're creating an event, to add the question about what food allergies they might have, all we have to do is go to the questions section on that event and say add question allergies. We never have to do that whole option of filling that all out again. So it saves us a lot of time. If we go back to our events, let's say we want to add that question to one of our events. Let's go to our question event here. So we've got an annual member dinner that we set up ahead of time. We can click on the pencil option to go into edit it. And in our basic info, as long as we have checked the questions option, which we have here, when we save that, you'll see the option to enter questions on your event. So it'll be one of the panels you see along the left-hand side here. You'll see I've already filled in some questions here. We've got our registration question, member first meeting. So this is a members event where they can bring guests. So we're asking the member, is this the first meeting you've attended? And we only want to ask that once for the entire registration. Even if they bring guests, we're only asking this question one time. And then for registrant questions, this needs to get asked of every individual person. If they're, signing up for the event, we want to make sure that we ask them for each person. So if we're having a dinner, we're going to ask them what's their dinner option, what's their dessert option, and then we're also including a food allergies question. Once we've added these options, you'll see we also have the option to add more questions. And any of those questions that are on our event, there's that allergies question I just made. We can swap that one in if we want. So I'll go ahead and add the allergies one I just made. I'll take off the old food allergies question. And now my event asks the dinner option question, dessert, and the allergies question for every individual person that signs up. So that's all we have to do to apply that question to the event. We don't have to recreate it every time. And for all of our future events, if we want to ask that question at sign up, all we do is just hit add question, select allergies. It is important to note that you cannot ask any particular question more than once on an event. So you can't ask allergies as a registrant question and as a registration question. So if I click add question up here, you'll see allergies doesn't show up. I can only ask it one time. If I have a question that I need to ask multiple times, I could just hit I could go and create that question multiple. So I could add allergies 1, allergies 2, allergies 3, all as individual questions. And that would let me add all of those individual questions to the event. But the actual same exact question can't be asked more than once. So now let's go take a look at what it looks like when someone creates a registration for this event. Let's go back to event and let's register for this event. So I'm going to register for this annual member dinner. I'm going to purchase a member dinner ticket and I'm going to bring a couple guests. I will hit register now. I'm going to sign up myself and 2 additional people. Those people are going to be test 1 and test 2. That is their names. And when I proceed, now it's going to ask me some questions. You'll see there's a registration question. So this is for an answer that I'm submitting for just once for the entire registration. It's not going to ask me this question again for my additional guests. Is this your first time attending an all-member meeting? I'll say, sure, it's my first time. And then I get my registrant questions. So this is a question for Martin Smith. Please select your meal option. I'll say Martin wants chicken. Please select your dessert. I want the chocolate lava cake. Do you have any food allergies? Martin Smith does not have any food allergies, and I can leave comments about it. And then it will repeat those questions for each of my guests as well. Questions for test one. He wants salmon, he wants New York cheesecake, and he's gluten free, he's vegan, and he can leave some comments about it. And then it'll ask me those same questions for a third time. Questions for test two. I can say, he wants the risotto and the mixed berry tart, and he's gluten free, and he also is allergic to onions. So when I choose an other option, you'll see it pops up a text box for me to manually fill in, and that will get captured on all of my events reports, as will the comments. And then I can proceed with my registration as normal, and I can just complete that registration, and I'll go ahead and mark it as paid so that it's done. And once that's done, we can now see that we've got some registrants for this event. And let's go take a look at how we find that information as the people running this event. If I click on the pencil to go back to my settings, I can go look at my registrations. And we will see Martin Smith is registered. And we can actually click on this little icon over here. The very first icon is the details icon. And we can see there's all of my responses. So I can look at them individually. So I can say, dinner option, we've got a salmon, a chicken, and a risotto. If we would prefer to get the exports for everyone who's signed up for this event, we can look at it in some of our reports. If we go back to a previous page, we can go and we can look at reports. And if we want registrations with answers, there's an option right there. So this will give us all of our registrations and answers to those registration questions. It's important to note that the registrations with answers will not include registrant answers. Those are two different types of questions. So the registration report will give us all of our registration questions, and our registrant reports. There we go. Event registrants. I believe that one's the one. So event registrants will give us all of the details of our event registrants and their answers. I know a lot of people, I just saw a question come in, can reports go to a spreadsheet? Yes, once you select any of these reports, you would just hit next, and you can choose your format that you want the report in. I do like to point out these reports are useful, but I do have a preferred way to get this information. My personal preferred way is, instead of using event reports, if you jump one button to the right using exports, these are all going to be CSV exports. So they are only going to export as spreadsheets, but this will give us just all the data in an Excel spreadsheet. And you've got right at the top, registration data and registrant data. These two will include all of the registration questions and all of the registrant questions. So it's a very quick way that we can then sort and say, sort by the response to the, dinner question. How many chicken do I need? How many salmon do I need? So on and so forth. Let's see. I saw a question come in that someone asked, jumping back a little bit, what if there's conflicting answers? There's not a way for us to say, if you select gluten-free, then don't let them select the cake option. That would just be something that they would need to be, aware of. You might notice that manually, but there's not an option to have, a response from one question invalidate a response from another question. So that's just something that you have to keep an eye out when you're having these events. All right, so that's event questions. I will go ahead and mention before we go into activity options, like multi-activity events. There is an additional use for questions in a multi-activity event. So when we're talking about multiple activity events in just a second, there is a third type of question you can ask, which is an activity or item question, which is a question just like we selected before. So we would use the same exact pool of questions here, but we can actually ask that specifically only to people that register for a particular activity. So if you sign up for the event as a whole, you might not get asked the question unless you sign up for a certain activity. And I'll show you how to use that in just a second. So let's go take a look at multi-activity events. If we go back to our control panel and go into the events manager one more time. So I'm in the control panel, websites tab, clicking on events. When I first add a new event, so I'm going to click add and then click event. The very first thing that we get asked is this a single activity event or a multiple activity event? It is the first question because it fundamentally changes the way events works. If we choose multiple activities, it doesn't change a lot on this page, but it changes a lot later on. So that's all we have to do to make a multi-activity event here. A majority of events we see made on Club Express are single activity events, and you can do a lot of interesting things by using questions. But multiple activity events are really useful for events that are having things take place overlapping. So if you're having an event where you have panels and different days of the event, you can sign up for, Friday, Saturday or Saturday, Sunday. Um, things like conferences where there's multiple selections and items that people can purchase. A multiple activity event is going to be the option you want to choose for setting up those really complex events. Once we save an event that is set up as multiple activity, let's go take a look at one in progress already. So we've got this conference right here. If we take a look at our conference, you'll see in our basic info, we've already set this to multi-activity. And because we've set up activities already, you'll notice the option to switch back to a single activity is gone. Once we start configuring a multiple activity event and we start configuring those activities, the option to switch back to single is gone because there's too much data in it for it to downgrade back to a single activity event. If we needed to change it over, what we would do is we would just usually cancel that event and copy it again. And instead of, or cancel an event and start over because we can't downgrade back to a single activity once there's multiple activities existing. For this conference, I've gone ahead and set it up as a 3-day conference. So it's taking place from Friday the 23rd through Sunday the 25th. So it's a 3-day conference, and that'll be important because that'll come up again in just a little bit. And you'll notice when we're looking at our specify what additional information is needed, I'm including questions here so that we can configure questions on our activities and items. And there's also a grayed out option here that says more than one activity. When we choose that option up above title to select multiple activity, this option is enabled for us. There's no need for us to turn that on or off. It's controlled by whether or not we set it up as a single or multiple activity event. Once we save that, if we go take a look at our questions page one more time, so we were just talking about questions. Once we configure something as a multiple activity event and we turn questions on, you'll see we have registration questions that we already did before. We've got registrant questions, and we have a third option here that says activity registrant questions. So these are questions that are asked of each registrant that registers for a specific activity. If we click on the pencil here, you'll notice we still only have the option to create registration questions and registrant questions. The option to add activity questions isn't located on the questions page. It's actually located on each individual activity. So now let's go take a look at the actual activities page and how we configure that. So if we click on activities, this panel over here that was turned on because it's a multiple activity event, you'll see the pencil icon here. And you'll see we've already got a few activities and items set up already, but we're going to continue to add more to this event. When I'm creating especially like a conference style event, where I'm having people register for the conference, but I'm also having people register for maybe different days. One kind of tip that I like to give people is I always set up a base registration that everyone must select. What I do with this base registration is I will give it a name and a date. So I'm going to give it, just the name conference registration. And then whenever you create an activity, it'll show up as a card here. And this activity is essentially a miniature event inside the event. People, when they're signing up for the event, they can select to sign up for these little mini events within it as well. It has its own registration and fees setting. It has its own who can register setting. And it has its own questions and its own reports and options. So it's essentially just a tiny little event inside of a larger event itself. What the registration page gives us, if we click on registration and fees, you'll see there's a few settings here. We have settings like, is it required, is registration required for this activity? This is pretty much always going to be yes. Very rarely will you have an activity that you set up that does not require registration. The main reason that this is here is if for some reason an activity is removed from the event later on, you need to stop people from signing up for it. You can come in here and switch it to no. The rest of our settings will disappear. We are no longer accepting registration for this activity. So if you have someone who's going to be speaking at a conference and they cancel, that was how you would turn that off to stop people from signing up for it. If you look at the next option down, it says, is this activity automatically added to a registration? And you have three options here. What this means is when people are signing up, is this activity automatically added? So is it already checked for them? So it's going to show up as a checkbox that they can select to attend. We can say, no, it's optional, meaning it's unchecked, and they can choose to add it to their registration. We can say yes, but the user can remove it, meaning it's already checked for them as they're signing up, but they have the option to uncheck it. So it's like a suggested, it's kind of like a default assumption that they're going to want to attend this, but they have the option to remove it. And then you can also come over here and say, yes, it's required. They cannot remove it. I like to do this as a base registration. That way I always have an activity that everyone is signing up for. It's also very useful if a multiple activity event has a absolute limit to the number of people that can attend. What I will do is I will say, yes, it's required, and I will set the capacity for this registration. So maybe we can only accept 1,000 registrants for this conference. That is the maximum number of people that can attend. And so if I say, yes, it's required, and there's a maximum, once we hit that maximum of 1,000 people, because this is required, it will turn off registration. Because since you can't register, there's no more room in a required activity, then the entire event is now considered full and no one can sign up anymore. If it were optional, once we hit this limit, people could still sign up for the event as a whole. They just wouldn't be able to select this particular activity. So I'm going to say, yes, it's required. Yes, there's a capacity. We will make that capacity known. We'll make it available. And there's, will there a fee be charged? So we can also charge individual fees for an activity. So if they select a particular activity, we can charge a certain price for it. For my base registration, I'm actually not going to charge a fee. You'll see later that I'm charging a fee per day instead of just for general registration. And I am going to track attendance for this. If you're using the continuing education module or points tracking, you can allow people to get credit for signing up for this activity, just like you would for a standard event. We will go ahead and save this page. We've updated our registration settings. You'll also see that we have a who can register option. Now, multiple activity events also change the way that the who can register function works. If we go back to the who can register over here, so we're jumping away from that multiple activity screen. Even if we're asking for people to pay for an event, normally this is the page where you would say attending this event costs, $50 or $20. Because it's a multiple activity event, we actually set the price per activity. So we don't set the price on the who can register page. We set it on each activity page. But we do, however, still need to set up who can attend this event. So you'll see I've already set up ahead of time the option for active members to attend, just like we did 2 weeks ago in our basic setup. We've got our member setup. We've got our member guests, so they're allowed to bring a non-member. And we're also going to let non-members sign themselves up, the same way we set up an event a couple weeks ago. What changes about this is now when we're setting up an activity or item, when I'm setting up who can register, it's going to reuse the options I set up on the who can register earlier. So when I say conference registration, who can register, the options available to me are, instead of that full list that we see on the major who can register page, we see the lists that were already set up. So there's member pass, guest pass, non-member pass. Those are the only options available to me instead of the full list of active member, non-member, member guest that we usually have before. This is also where we would set a price if we were asking for one. Again, for our major conference, for our conference registration, the base registration for this event, we are not asking for any fees. What we will ask for fees are the number of days that people are attending. So we've got something like 3 day attendance where I'm coming Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then I've also made an activity for Friday, and we'll go ahead and walk through the process of adding activities for Saturday and Sunday as well. For my 3 day attendance, I've done the same thing, except for the only difference between 3 day attendance and registration. When we look at our registration and fees, this one is optional. So for all 3 days of the event, you can choose whether or not you want to sign up for 3 day attendance. The rest of the settings are relatively the same. And then on our Who Can Register page, we've set our member pass, guest pass, and non-member pass. And on this page, we did set a price. So what we would do is we can say for our members, all 3 days is $50, and we would hit add, and it would show up down here. And when a member selects to attend the 3 day attendance option, it is going to charge them $50 for that. If they select other options throughout, then it will charge them those things as well. So they can kind of build a cart as they check out to select multiple activities, and then it'll give them a total price based on their activity selection. You'll also see for each of these activities, we have a question option. So we can add questions to an activity, and it will only show that question to them if they sign up for that activity. We did the same setup for Friday attendance. The only difference between 3 day attendance and Friday attendance is the price. So for Friday attendance, I'm only charging $20, $30, and $30 for my member guests and my non-members. So my members are getting a little bit of a discount over my people who are not members of the organization. And I can repeat that process as many times as I need. So I want to repeat that process for Saturday and Sunday as well. There's 2 ways we could go about adding more activities. We can say new activity button up here, and I want to make Saturday attendance. This is going to take place on, I'm going to set my date as Saturday. I will save that activity, and now you'll see I've added to my list Saturday attendance. I need to set up my registration and fees. So I'll say this is optional. Is the capacity limited on Saturday? I'm going to go ahead and say no, because I'm limiting the capacity based on that base registration. Sure, I can track attendance if I want to, but for the most part, the settings we have here are just fine for this activity. We will save. So we've got our Saturday attendance, and then we need to set a price for Saturday attendance. So we can say who can register. There's all of the registration types again that we selected on our main registration page. If I'm using the same pricing from one activity to another, I can actually copy from a different activity. So my Saturday price is going to be the same as my Friday price. So instead of having to manually fill this all in and say member pass is, $20, I can not add that. And instead I can say copy from Friday attendance. I can save myself just a couple clicks, say copy, and it'll pull all the pricing and selections that we made for Friday over into this activity. And we can save. So now we've got our activity for Saturday set up. We've got our who can register for it. And now this is a functioning activity that people can select from when they're signing up for the event. Now I also need a Sunday attendance. Another way that we can add more activities, once we've got kind of one activity, we need to add another activity that's very similar to it. Instead of going through that whole new activity process, there's actually a little copy button on every single activity and item. We can hit Saturday attendance copy, and instead of Saturday, we want Sunday, and save. And now it's made an exact copy of the Saturday attendance. The only difference is we still do need to set up who can register. It does not copy the registration settings. What we do is we just hit who can register. You'll notice we don't have our settings here yet, but we can still just choose that same copy. And we can choose either Friday or Saturday because they both have the same settings. And we copy. And now we've got those same prices. So now people can choose from signing up for all 3 days or just 1 or 2 of the days that they want to attend. We also want to make sure that we are ordering these in the order that we want them to show up. So you'll see that there's a button up here that says display sequence. And I want this to show my conference registration first. Then I want to prioritize my 3-day attendance. But then I want Friday, Saturday, Sunday to show up next. And I can use these little arrows to move my attendance around. So now we've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then we'll talk about our panels and our hat in just a second here. So now I've got conference registration. It's required. You have to sign up for that in order to attend the event, and the limit is 1,000. Then I've got the 3-day attendance, and then the individual days that people can purchase: Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We also have panels. So this is another thing that people use for events, or for multi-activity events. When you are setting up a conference, a lot of times people will have events inside of the event. So this would be something like a speaker panel in a certain room, and maybe we can only fit 20 people into that room. We're fine having 1,000 people attend the event, but we can only fit 20 people into the room where panel A is happening. So when we create a panel option or an event inside this event, what we can do on our registration and fees, we can say this is an optional panel that people can select. We're having people speak about a certain topic, but we can limit the capacity here. Because it's optional, once it fills up, people will no longer be able to select this activity. It'll show as full, but people can still sign up for the event as a whole because it is optional. For our who can register on this panel, we have allowed all of the people to register, and it's free. So it's just first come, first serve. We've made it easy for people to sign up for this activity, but once it's full, there's no more room left in order to attend that activity. We can do the same thing for our panel 2. It's taking place at the same time, just in a different room. So those are also activities. So everything we've covered so far has been an activity. It's something you're signing up for to attend. 3-day attendance, Friday attendance, you're attending a panel. There are also options that are non-time specific. So there's things like digital or physical merchandise options, and we would call those items. So when we click new item up here, you'll see we already have one item set up here. Whenever we create an activity, it's asking for a date and time that it's taking place. Items, when we create an item, you'll know there's no date option applied to it. So this could be something like a t-shirt that people are purchasing as a part of attending this event. We can save that item option. And now we've got the members only hat and a t-shirt. When we add an item, the registration and fees for an item is slightly different. We have the option to say it's optional. Yes, but you can remove it. It's required to purchase a t-shirt. We also have the option to set up item quantities. So we can say it's limit 1 per person, so you can only purchase 1 shirt. Or we can say you can buy as many shirts as you want. You can say you're allowed to purchase 1. The default is usually 1. The minimum is usually also 1. But the maximum we can set here is we can say, sure, you can buy 10 t-shirts if you want. And you can also set a capacity for this. You can say, yes, we have limited capacity. We only have 200 t-shirts. So we can show that capacity. We could also, if we wanted to, say, we have 200 large t-shirts and 200 medium t-shirts and 200 small t-shirts, we could create an activity or an item for each of those if we wanted to. And this is an inventory-based capacity. So this doesn't mean that 200 people can buy shirts. It means 200 shirts can be purchased. So if 20 people buy 10 t-shirts, then the capacity would be maxed out. It wouldn't let 200 people buy 10 t-shirts. So now we've added a t-shirt option. We still need to set a price and who is allowed to buy a t-shirt. We can say, anyone can buy a t-shirt. It can come with a member pass. We'll say it's $10 for a t-shirt. It can come with a guest pass, same price, and a non-member pass, same price. That means whether you're signing up for a member pass, whether you're signing up for a guest pass or a non-member pass, it's all $10 per t-shirt. If you buy multiples, so if you buy 10 t-shirts, it would multiply that. It would be $100. Then there's an option. So I've already created this member hats option. So this members only hat here is only available to members. This is an interesting thing you can do with multi-activity events. When you're setting up your registration fees, so I did for the members hat, I did just what I did on that t-shirt. The only difference between these two is the price and who can buy it. So on the who can register page, the price for a hat is $15. And you'll notice I did not add the guest pass or non-member pass option. I've only added it on the member pass option. So I have made this members only. When a non-member is signing up for that non-member pass, because there is not an option listed here, they will not see the option to purchase something for members only. So this is a way to have an option for, specific members or specific members of a committee or board members or something to get different prices or different availability for different activities in an event or different items as well. So the same thing can be done to activities. You could set up a board of directors dinner at an event that only the board of directors can register for. You can do a lot of interesting things with your who can register for certain events and activities. So now that we've got all of these activities and items set up, we've got our attendance, we've got the days that people can attend, we've got our panels, and then we've got our members only hat and our t-shirt. Let's take a look at what having all of these items on our event looks like for the registration. It is important to know that multi-activity events are probably the most complex events that you can make on ClubExpress, and the registration is similarly more complex. It's not as complex as setting up for the registrants, but there are just more options to select as you are registering. So if I go back to my event, this is the landing page for my event. You'll see the option for who is attending, and I say I am going to sign up for this event. I am going to bring 2 guests, or I'll bring 1 guest. I think I only set it to, sorry, I selected the wrong guest. I'm going to bring 2 guests. So I'm purchasing a member pass and I'm going to bring 2 guest passes. I will choose to register. Just as before, I still see that same sign myself up. I still see the same guests that can attend. And then I'm seeing that same screen as before. I'm going to say my same test 1 and test 2. And then I proceed. And now I'm going to be presented with the activity options that are available to me. So I do need to zoom out a little bit. I'm a little too zoomed in. We'll see that conference registration is set at 1 for Martin Smith. So this is the activities and items that we're selecting for Martin Smith. I do not have the option to get rid of conference registration. It is always selected. But then I do have the options for, do I want 3-day attendance? Do I want Friday attendance, Saturday, Sunday? Then there's panel 1 in room 1, panel 2 in room 2. There's my member hat and my t-shirt. If I look at the options on the right-hand side, I can add to these. If I choose, say, 3-day attendance here, I have added 3-day attendance, and this registrant's total is now $50. This is a place where there is a mild limitation on multi-activity events. A lot of people do this option where they set up something like 3-day attendance and then they'll still allow for individual days. This does open up the issue that some people might purchase 3-day attendance and then get confused and say, well, I also want to attend on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. When I select items that overlap in the time that they're set up, it will give me these messages. So that's one way that we can say, 3-day attendance is overlapping with these items. So it's going to give us this little error, but it will not stop people from selecting these options. I can still purchase items even though I get this red, overlap message. So it's important to make sure that somewhere in your event details, you let people know, purchase either 3-day attendance or purchase individual days, not both, because then it might cause you to have to, cancel or refund registrations. Or some people will just avoid that complication altogether by not offering things like 3-day attendance options. They'll say, you'll just pick the days you want to attend. There's no discount for buying all 3 or anything like that. So that would be another way to get around it. You'll notice for my panels here, if I'm selecting 3-day attendance, my panels take place at the same time. They're just in different rooms. If I select one panel, well, it's not giving me the message. I clearly did some sort of configuration wrong, but they should give me that overlapping message for some reason. I probably set it at the same time as my Fridays here. but the panels take place at the same time. If they are set up to take place at the same time, they should give you that this overlaps with another item message. So signing up for both, you would be able to tell that you're not going to have time to attend both. You have to pick one. There is not a way in the system. This is something a lot of people ask about, and it's just not something that we've developed yet. It is something that we continue to talk about. There's not a way to say, if I sign up for this activity, don't let me sign up for this activity over here. There's not a way for me to invalidate selecting one activity by selecting another. It's something that we've considered, and it might be something that is included in a future update. But for now, it's important to know that there isn't a way someone could come in here and check every single item, even if they're not able to, attend every single one of those. Um, all right. You'll also notice when someone's signing up for activity. So I'm signing up for Martin Smith right now. You'll also see the same options are available for test one and test two with one difference. They can sign up for the same conference. Their prices are a little bit different because they're not members. So Martin is a member and he's signing up for a member pass, and the cost of a member pass is slightly lower than the cost of a guest pass because they are not members. We can also notice that the members only hat is only showing up for Martin because he's signing up for that member pass that we created, which applies only to members. The guest pass applies to non-members, and we did not set an option for guests to purchase the members only hat, so it does not appear. There is not an option for test one to sign up to purchase a member hat. And we get the same options for test two. So we're going to say all three of these people are signing up for the 3-day attendance, and they're all going to buy a t-shirt, and Martin is going to buy 2 hats. It'll tell me the total for each registrant, and then it'll show me the entire total for all of the people combined. And that's what those activities and items look like when we're registering for an event. If we proceed with our registration, the rest of the registration is as it was before. The main difference is going to be we'll continue to see any questions. These are activity questions as we see them based on the activities we signed up for. We can then proceed. Give it just a second. I can answer a question while it's loading. Someone asked, can we change the cost of the registration based on the date? Yes, there is an option whenever you are setting up an event registration to say fee changes on a certain date, and you can kind of control how that's referred to. Let's see. There we go. The page finally loaded. There's the details of the registration and the cost, and we can complete registration just as before. Yeah. Oh, I just got another question. Since Martin is a member, he can purchase multiple hats. Um, and then that would allow him to give hats to someone else. That's true. Yeah. Martin could totally buy 3 hats and then give one to his friends. If we wanted to stop that from happening, we could set the maximum number of hats to 1, and then it would be 1 per person. So that there's a way to stop people from, buying hats for their friends. You could just say limit 1. I didn't set that limit 1 per member, so it let Martin buy multiple hats. All right. So that's the registration. You can see all the details for all the different activities here. That's the registration process. It does add more selections. Obviously, we've made a more complex event, so the registration for that event gets more complex for the people signing up. But once they're signed up, you can also look at from the back end of the event, you can look at the same exports and reports as before, but now there are specific activity exports and activity reports as well that will give us details about who signed up for what activities. So we can see, if you're having 20 different panels at your conference, you need to double check to make sure that someone, reserved a seat at that panel. You can print out the activity registrant data report, and that will let you see, is their name on the list for this activity? Is their name on the list for having purchased a hat? All of those things that can kind of give you the details of who signed up for what. And you can kind of, put that information in whatever format you like. If you prefer it in a more like PDF kind of visually pleasing report style, you could choose the reports here. And there are activity registrants by activity. That's one of the reports that I definitely recommend. You'll notice there are reports here that don't show up when you're looking at a single activity event. By choosing multiple activity event, you get access to more reports that are based on activity and item. But activity registrants by activity, you could choose to export that as a PDF, and that will give you groups of who actually signed up for what activity, grouped by the particular activity. All right. As always with events, I've gone a little bit over time, but Evan, are there any questions I can go back and cover and clarify on before we wrap up for today?
Uh, One thing I think I decided was a good question was when you're adding a question, there's an option to link to, so like link to an additional member data question.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating like a new one, like
Oh, so if
that.
you wanted to create a new link, so let's say you wanted to, collect someone's favorite color and then add that as an, event question, or if you want to store their allergy information, we can go over to the control panel. If we were to set up a question in the people tab, let's go over to additional member data. So if we go to the people tab of the control panel and create an additional member data question, we're going to speed through this. I'm going to add a question. This is very similar to our event questions, but this one is going to be, I'll call this allergies. This is a checkbox, fish, onions, nuts. Oh, putting that in the wrong place, aren't I? That's supposed to go in the item list. For the question text, we'll say, do you have any allergies? Food allergies. We'll give people the options, same as before, allow other. That's all fine. So now we've got an allergies additional member data question, which will show up in our member profile. So if we go look at Martin's profile, there should be, do you have any food allergies, is an item that is stored in Martin's profile. And I could say fish and onions. And now that I have a data point in the additional member data section or in the basic info section, when I'm going back to create an event question, so we'll go back to our events and add an event question. I can link to additional member data, so additional data, allergies. It'll fill in the same details. Allergies, do you have any food allergies? The same options. All of that auto fills for me. And all I have to do is just hit save. Yeah. So now I've got allergies too. And you can see that allergies here is linked to the allergies question. And anytime a member is registering for an event, this question shows up, it'll autofill their answer into that event question. If they submit a different response, let's say someone is answering this question and in their profile it says fish and onions, but when they sign up for this event, they say onions and nuts, it will also update their member profile. Evan, correct me on that. I'm pretty sure that's true, though. It'll update their member profile to this answer.
I'm pretty sure it does that as well.
Yeah. Um, so whatever their ongoing answer, and this isn't, obviously I'm using food allergy as an example. This could be things like their driver's license number if they have, or like a boating license or something like that, or favorite color, any question you can ask. Obviously the sky's the limit on the types of questions you can ask. I just always use food allergies as an example because it lets me do these kind of multiple choice options that shows how complex you can get with it. um, but that's really all that link to does, is it just connects it to a data point in a member's question. It's important also to note that if someone who is not a member is asked this question, it will just ask the question as normal. They don't have to be a member to get this question. But if they are not a member, it will obviously not have any filled in data because this is linking to member information. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We'll have the recording of this up on our YouTube channel in a few days. Usually, it's the following Monday that you should see it hit our YouTube channel, and we'll see you in our next webinar. Thank you so much, guys.